welcome to Advanced and Performance Driving. I'm Reg Local. I'll do something on motorways today. So I'm just going to cover the basics, I think, in this video, and that's a bit of a description of motorways, a bit of a look at how they work, how the lanes work, and then the basics of joining the motorway and leaving the motorway. So our motorway network, our trunk road network, is designed to move large numbers of vehicles and heavy goods vehicles up and down the country, covering longer distances at higher speeds. It doesn't always work like that, does it? Because we've got a lot more traffic on the road these days than we used to. But they are still our main trunk roads. If you're travelling any distance, generally you want to use the motorways. One of the oddities about learning to drive in this country is that up until very, very recently, learner drivers have been banned from the motorway. So almost everybody that you see driving along the motorway has never actually been taught how to drive properly on the motorway. Now, in one respect, there isn't really a lot that you need to know about driving along the motorway. When you're on one carriageway like this, you're just going in one direction. You haven't got junctions every couple of minutes and roundabouts and traffic lights and all the other hazards that you get with other roads on our networks. But it is worth knowing a few of the basics, and if you're learning to drive, or if you're learning to pass an advanced driving test, you're certainly going to need to know the basics of motorway driving, if nothing else. So what is a motorway? Well, a motorway is a special road. That means it's been designated by the Secretary of State as a special road. In real terms, that means that generally motorways are dual carriageway roads with 2 or more lanes in either direction, usually separated with a central reservation, and generally they are bordered on the left with a hard shoulder, which is there for use in emergencies. Speed limit for cars and motorcycles on the motorway is 70 miles an hour. A lot of people tend to travel a little bit faster than that, but we're going to stick within what we're supposed to do. Certainly for the purposes of this video, we'll be sticking to a 70 limit. I think maybe next year I might just bob over to Germany for a weekend and do a video on high-speed driving on the autobahns there, but we're not going to do that on British motorways. So let's start by looking at how we join the motorway. The important thing to remember is that motorways have slip roads or acceleration lanes. It's really, really important that we use those acceleration lanes correctly when we're joining the motorway. And the idea is that we're going to get our speed up and accelerate so that our speed matches the speed of the vehicles in lane 1. Now, a lot of people seem to think that the vehicles in lane 1 are obliged to let us join. Now, it's nice if they can help us out, but actually it's our responsibility as the driver that's joining the motorway to match our speed to vehicles in lane 1 and find a gap and sit alongside a gap and then slide across into it. So we're not aiming to join at the first opportunity. We're going to use the slip road, use as much of the slip road as you want to match your speed. So here it's quite a tight bend, but I'm looking to the right at the movement of traffic, and now I'm starting to build my speed up, starting to increase my speed now, and now I'm going to use the slip road. I sit in the slip road, check my mirrors, give a signal and a shoulder check before moving out into lane 1. Now immediately we pass a route confirmation sign and a sign confirming where the nearest services are. The nearest services are just a mile further along the motorway. Route confirmation board just confirms that we've joined the motorway in the right direction. If we haven't, well, the next choice is to leave the motorway at the next exit and turn around and go back again. So motorways in the UK are generally dual carriageway roads. That means there's 2 separate carriageways going in either direction. And they're bordered on the left, usually with a hard shoulder. And then you've got your running lanes. There could be 2, 3, 4 running lanes. And then a central reservation with a barrier, and then the opposite carriageway the other direction. There's a few special rules for motorways. Certain vehicles that aren't allowed to use the motorways, like mopeds under 50cc, tractors. It used to be that learner drivers under all circumstances couldn't use the motorways, but nowadays that's been changed. and under certain circumstances provisional licence holders can use the motorways. And that's a pretty good thing really, to be honest, because that allows people to learn properly how to drive on the motorway. Now, as far as the running lanes are concerned, the lanes that we drive along in, first thing we need to clear up is that there is not a slow lane, a middle lane and a fast lane. Most people seem to be under this impression that there's a slow lane on the left for lorries, slow moving traffic, and that there's a middle lane in the centre for driving along in, and that there's a fast lane for fast moving vehicles to overtake it. And that isn't the case. The truth of the matter is there is lane 1, lane 2, lane 3 and lane 4 and however many other lanes there are. At the moment we're sat in lane 1. And lane 1 is the lane that you would normally drive along in if there's nothing in front of you, there's nothing slowing you down. Lane 1 is your driving along lane. Lanes 2 and 3, 4 are overtaking lanes. So we use those lanes if we want to overtake slow moving traffic. If there isn't any slow moving traffic, generally we will stick in lane 1. If you look in my mirror, there's been a Mini sat in lane 2 for about the last 10 miles. Not overtaking anything, it's not overtaking us, it's doing exactly the same speed as we are, just sat in the middle lane. You'll find there's a lot of people on British motorways seem to think that the middle lane is for driving along in. Yeah, that isn't the case. We're going to drive in lane 1, we're going to use lanes 2 and lanes 3 if we're overtaking. Once we've completed an overtake, then we'll return to lane 1 again. Now here I'm staying out in lane 2 in these circumstances because I'm still catching up on the Ford Focus in lane 1. Got a broken down vehicle on the hard shoulder, so I'm just moving to the right of my lane. And we've got several slower moving vehicles up ahead. We've got the Land Rover, we've got the bus. So for those vehicles I'm going to stay out in lane 2. You can see that the silver car behind has moved out into lane 3 to overtake us. You can see him in my offside door mirror. Once I'm past the Land Rover, however, I'm going to move to the left. So I'm checking the near side mirror, checking the centre mirror, and moving back across to the left to lane 1. So let's think about how we exit the motorway. I want to leave at the next exit, and there I can see the first sign for the exit, and that is 1 mile from the junction. So at 1 mile away I've got plenty of time to plan my exit. The aim is to be in lane 1 at the 300-yard marker with the left indicator on. But I'm still moving faster than the vehicles in lane 1 at the moment, so I'm staying out in lane 2, possibly going to complete the overtake on the red car in lane 1. And there's the half-mile board for the junction. So actually I'm not going to get past this car. I'm going to check my mirrors, move back into lane 1. The plan now is to have the left indicator on at the 300-yard marker if we're doing 70 miles an hour. Checking the mirrors, left signal at the 300-yard marker. There's the next sign, which is at the start of the slip road. The final sign you'll get is a little confirmation sign there with A6 on it, just confirms right at the bull nose of the junction, just confirming that we're on the correct road. So the first thing we're looking for are closing gaps in lane 1. So a closing gap in lane 1 is where you've got a faster moving vehicle closing up on a slow moving vehicle in lane 1. The next thing that's going to happen is that faster moving vehicle will move out to lane 2 to overtake the slow moving vehicle. Now that might sound really obvious, but quite often we only see the vehicles when they're starting to move out into lane 2, and if we can train ourselves to spot them earlier and spot the closing gaps, then it's quite satisfying to be able to move out a lane and create the space to allow people to move out so they're not being caught by surprise by vehicles moving out at the last minute. Some of the other things you'll see along the motorway are marker posts. Marker posts are those little white, red and blue markers. They're every 100 metres along the motorway. What the marker posts do is they tell you exactly where you are on the motorway. They're a very accurate positioning marker, generally used by engineers and by the emergency services, by the police, just to locate exactly where incidents or where things are happening. And marker posts are every 100 metres along the side of the motorway. I'll tell you a couple of bits of information. The first one is the meterage, the distance from the start of the motorway. And actually, if you look on the side of them as well, you'll also see a little picture of a telephone and an arrow, and that will tell you the direction of the nearest emergency telephone box. Now, you might think that emergency telephone boxes are a bit of an anachronism these days, a little bit old-fashioned. Most people have mobile phones. Why do we need emergency telephone boxes? Well, actually, emergency telephone boxes are still the best place to stop and seek assistance if you have an emergency on the motorway. Most people wouldn't have a clue exactly where they are on the motorway. At the moment, I know that I'm on the M6 South, I'm north of Preston, south of Lancaster, and I'm heading south, but that's as much as I can tell you. Whereas if we use an emergency telephone box, and there's one here, we'll be able to see, the operator will know exactly where you are, which carriageway you're on, which motorway you're on, and they'll be able to get help to you much more quickly. They'll be able to more accurately locate you as well if there's an accident, and they'll be able to use the matrix boards to warn other vehicles and other drivers of your presence. So you might have seen these signs popping up recently, the blue sign there with the yellow writing on it. All that does is repeat the information that's on the marker posts. Again, these have been installed to help people when they're using mobile phones in an emergency. So if we witness an accident on the motorway now, the operator will probably ask us to read out the next one of these signs so that they can quite accurately place where the accident occurred. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't know which motorway they're on, they don't know which junction they're near, and Lancashire in particular has more miles of motorway than any other county in the country. So they could be on the M6, the M58, the M55, the M61, the M65. If they read out one of these signs, it will tell them we're on the M6, we're on the B carriageway, which is the southbound carriageway, at 365.8. That's 365.8 kilometres from the start of the M6. So that locates us nice and accurately. So there's a pair of emergency telephone boxes. You'll notice that they're immediately opposite each other on the motorway. One there and one there. They're immediately opposite each other for a very good reason. It's to prevent anybody being tempted from crossing the live lanes of the motorway to go and use an emergency telephone box. If we break down on this side of the motorway, we will always have an emergency telephone box on our side of the motorway. There's got a vehicle broken down on the hard shoulder now. I'm just going to check the mirrors and move into lane 2. Just in case anybody steps out, moves around that vehicle. It's a horse box. Now the interesting thing about traffic on motorways is that it travels in clumps. So you can see we're just catching up with a clump of traffic here. These clumps of traffic tend to build up around one or two slow moving vehicles. So I'm checking the mirrors, moving out into lane 2. Ready for any of these slow moving vehicles to move out. The Fiat Panda's indicating, but I've got a faster moving BMW coming up in lane 3, so I'm not moving out. I'm just going to wait until we've caught up, check the mirrors, and move out into lane 3. Once I can see the white Corsa in the centre mirror, I'm going to move back to lane 2. We're out of the way of any faster moving vehicles that want to overtake. Now years ago we used to try and avoid making a line of 3 vehicles abreast on the motorway, and that was to make sure that we always had some space next to us if something went wrong. These days it's becoming more and more difficult to avoid making a line of 3 vehicles abreast, but we still do try and apply that principle where we can. Staying out in lane 2 because I'm catching up on this little Fiesta. Checking the mirrors, I've got a faster moving vehicle coming up behind. A little bit of crosswind at the moment on this stretch of motorway. Just see the car moving slightly. So So what I tend to do is just make sure I've got both hands on the wheel, fairly relaxed grip, and be ready to lean into that wind if we need to. So looking right ahead now, motorways are an excellent place to be using this principle of very, very long forward observation. So we can see about 3/4 of a mile in the distance at the moment. Just checking the mirrors, there's an overtaking vehicle coming out. Once we pass this car on the near side, check the mirrors and move across to lane 1. So checking the mirrors, moving out into lane 2. Now I like to move out really early. Get yourself out into your overtaking lane nice and early. That allows the vehicle that you're about to overtake to see that you're approaching in lane 2, that you're a faster moving vehicle. You have less tendency to move out in front of you, in the middle of your overtake. It just sort of asserts your position on the road in lane 2 or in lane 3. So once we're past this overtaken vehicle, I'm going to check the mirrors and move to lane 2. But as we know, where there's an off slip, there's usually an on slip, and here it's no different. What the sign says is there's 2 lanes coming in from the left. The first one is a traditional sort of slip road that will join our road, and the second one is what's called a permanent lane gain. So the farthest lane, lane 1, becomes lane 1, if that makes sense. What you tend to find is a lot of people don't realise that it becomes lane 1 and they try to change lanes. So be ready for people to swoop out even though they don't need to. So now we're on a 4-lane stretch of motorway, just checking the mirrors. Again, no reason for us not to. We're going to move into lane 1. We're only going to use lanes 2, 3 and 4 if we need them to overtake. This stretch of the M6 actually has a particularly bad surface, but especially if you're travelling at higher speeds. You notice there they've actually put a sign up. You don't often see an uneven road surface sign on motorways, do you? But this has always been particularly bad since they widened it to 4 lanes. You can see the car moving around a little bit over the bumps. So that's a bit of an introduction to motorways. It's all the basics that you need to know if you want to drive on the motorway in the UK. There is quite a bit more to it. I haven't looked at managed motorways yet, or smart motorways, whatever you want to call them. So maybe we'll do smart motorways on the next motorway video, and then like I say, we will probably do a high-speed motorway video during the summer next year. Planning on bobbing over to Germany for a weekend, getting on the autobahns so I can show you the basics of how to drive at very high speeds on the motorway. But that's it for now. Don't forget to go and have a look at the website, reglocal.com. Loads more information there about advanced and performance driving. But for now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.